Capital, and FNCon, Foxconn Technology Group, Srinivasan Siriam, SkuChain, Lamar Wilson, Fluent, and John Wolpert, IBM.
All right, great. Welcome, everyone. My name is Nolan Bowerly, and I'm the founder of Borderless Blockchain, which really looks at some of the Nick Szabo type theories about how much pressure blockchain is putting on borders and the institutions within them. And the people on this panel are dealing with this every day, the limitations our borders have on our transactions and on our day-to-day life. And this is quite a unique panel because not only are these people all very respected in their fields, this is an $18 trillion industry. It's massive. And we're seeing real solutions happening now. So this stuff is not just theoretical. These people have built solutions that are useful to people. And I'm going to let them get started a little bit by introducing themselves and what their history is with this technology and blockchain. So Jack, if you'd start.
Okay, thanks, Nolan. Hi, I'm Jack Lee, work for Foxconn, in charge of supply chain finance solution. And we now also look at some efficient and effective way to do the what we call the future supply chain business to help our customer, which means the supplier of Foxconn.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Jack. Shriram from SkuChain.
Hi, my name is Sriram, and I'm a co-founder of SkuChain, and we build solutions for supply chain and trade finance. I came into this field when I left India on a ship. I'm a qualified captain on the merchant marine boats, and then I came to New York for further studies and worked at Citi and Solomon Brothers, and then into technology. So the combination of finance, fintech, and logistics essentially came together when I saw Bitcoin. I thought, wow, the chain could be more valuable here than the coin.
My name is Lamar Wilson. I am the CEO of Fluent. I started with the technology in a little bit of a different way. I started in the Bitcoin space. We built a wallet called the Fever wallet. We made it so easy your grandmother could use Bitcoin. We actually pivoted from that after we noticed that a lot of the Bitcoin companies didn't need an enterprise solution, because that was the beginning of what we were building, was the first wallet, and then we were going to build into an enterprise solution. Realized the large Bitcoin companies didn't really need an enterprise solution for Bitcoin, and our background is building enterprise solutions. So what we did, we started talking to a lot of people and found out what the real problems were, and then we associated our technology to the real problems to solve them. So that's how we're here now.
And John from IBM.
Hi, I'm John Wolpert. Actually, I'm playing Vitalik on TV. This is actually Vitalik's shirt.
Vitalik gave it off his back.
Half hour ago. Yeah, right.
Stripped right down.
So, no, he had another shirt. So he's like, hey, I'm like, I need an Ethereum shirt, and he's like, here. So I'm like, yeah. So and I'll talk about why that's important. But yeah, we at IBM, I'm the head of products for blockchain at IBM globally, and we're really into supply chain, trade finance, documentary logistics, and for all the reasons that we'll be discussing.
So I wrote the recent CoinDesk report on trade finance, and I was lucky enough to interview a few of these gentlemen during the report. And what they all managed to do was tell me these anecdotes about the diabolical processes that people have to go through now for simple exchanges. We have Foxconn here, who, Steve Jobs, of all the things he invented, one of the things that he's known for is supply chain optimization. And he only dealt with the A-teams. And Foxconn was an A-team. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about these diabolical processes so we can educate the audience before we get into the blockchain discussions.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Let's give an example. I don't want to show the name of the font, but maybe you can tell. For example, like for this for this font, you know, Foxconn make this kind of product, 3C product, maybe involved with several hundred suppliers in this supply chain, even including not only for the component, but also for the test equipment, which, for example, some of our OEM customer, they have a very tough, very strict selection of a supplier, not just decided by Foxconn, but also by the OEM. So even, as I say, even they have to certify each supplier. Even it's a second tier supplier of Foxconn. You know what I'm saying? Not the direct supplier, but even some material supplier, for example, for metal, for aluminum, even for test equipment, for example. So indeed, it is a very lengthy process for us to manage in the supply chain for our OEM customer, especially when the new product come out. Before they come out, we have to meet with the very limited time of supply, turnaround time, time to market, time to volume, So there are a lot of things to do. So how to managing a good supply chain is the very, very, very tough thing for us.
Shriram, I think, gave one of the best anecdotes I heard that really puts this into perspective, and it's the pounds that are shipped. And if you could share that with the audience, I think they'd understand exactly how awful the current system is.
So if you just think of a global trade transaction, and if you think of any kind of a commodity or an item that is being shipped and the manner in which it's being shipped, you've got a lot of moving parts. Typically the instrument that is used to govern that kind of a trade is either the letter of credit or an open account transaction. For example, in the OEMs who work with Foxconn, it's largely, look, we'll pay you in 30 or 60 days or some such open account manner. But in some other transactions for commodities, it might be the aluminum, for example. It would be a letter of credit. And these are like 350-year-old instruments. They haven't changed much, largely because of trust, right? The buyer may not fully trust the seller. And each of them, they trust their own banks. And so you have multiple parties involved. And then you've got governments who want to sort of inspect the goods, and customs and freight and logistics. So you begin to see it starts getting complex. And this is just one transaction. We just heard about second tier and third tier. So now you've got all of these moving parts, multiple tiers. And at the end of the day, you need to have quality, and you need to have inventory. You need to know where your inventory is. Gartner had these 3 V's of the supply chain: visibility, velocity, and variability, and those are key. And we can get into more detail as to how the blockchain helps you.
And one real tangible piece of evidence that you provided was that your typical transaction is 5 to 6 pounds of paper being couriered. 5 to 6 pounds of paper being couriered around. Lamar's business, Fluent, has spent about a year studying supply chains and trade finance before they came out of stealth mode in March, and I'm sure you learned a lot in your time.
Yeah, we basically did what residents do at a hospital, and we follow around CFOs, talk to controllers, treasurers, those types of things. And one of the biggest problems we found is that these guys want to free up working capital. And they want to free it up by extending their days payable outstanding to a point that is probably not easy to swallow for the supplier. And that problem, there are a lot of people who are coming at that problem in a situation of a silo. And they basically have allowed the buyer to take the invoice, but then those guys factor it. Everyone knows what factoring is, where the supplier takes the invoice, sells it in a bunch of marketplaces, and they wind up getting a pretty bad rate because they don't have really great credit ratings at the supplier level. So what we thought of, we were like, okay, how can we take some of the friction out of that? And what we said was, can we take those invoices and create an asset that is then able to be traded in another marketplace. And when you do that, you take the pressure off of the buyer. So now the buyer approves it, which makes it an asset, which makes it, for lack of a better term, a security in so many words, and it allows them to take that and put that into a marketplace that now they don't have to pay it, and large institutions can come in and pay for that solution. And when we started talking about that, now all of a sudden you have a situation where you've added value not only for the supplier because now they get money faster, you've added value for the buyer because now they're able to extend their days payable outstanding further than what they were before. And now you've also added value for lenders and those people who are liquidity providers to allow them to buy these assets from a AAA rated company, but also still help out the supplier at the same time. And so listening to those problems, it really allowed us to say, okay, how can we use a blockchain to do that? And everyone understands the digital assets, signatures, those type of things allow you to do that in a blockchain space that you may not be able to do in the current siloed situations. So a network is everything. You have to have the network, and that's what we found out through our studies.
Speaking of networks, IBM is in the middle of, I believe, 4,000 partners and suppliers within their supply chains. And I guess they process about 2.9 million transactions per year. And if you can explain a little bit about what a mess that must add up to.
Another interesting statistic, it's a couple years old, but I remember it from 2 years ago. We buy something like $87 billion of stuff for other people, right? We buy, I think, one major companies all of their toilet paper, right? So we're pretty good at the leverage contract, which is not something that a lot of people know about IBM. We're a really good logistics company. Integrated supply chain logistics is a major competency for the company, not something you normally hear about. I really like these stories about real user experience, getting out and talking to people, having life story. Because my life story, I grew up in Michigan, and a lot of my extended family were in the supplying the automotive industry, OEMers, and my first job was in a plastic molding company. And today, almost all machines that make parts that go into a car have a telemetry port on them. They have telemetry. And I know at least one supplier where the telemetry goes into a CSV file on their laptop, right? That's where it goes. Now imagine you're the NTSB and you are investigating a car crash. Say it's a particular maker. I won't say which one, but that part is the problem. That's what caused the crash, and it's in 1 million of this maker's car. That's a 1 million car recall. Now, if you could interrogate the telemetry, you would find that it was only made during a 15-minute window when that machine was out of tolerance by a smidge. Didn't throw the red line, but that was the problem. It's only in 50 cars, right? And if that supplier supplies more than one OEMer, maybe 30 of those cars are in another maker's vehicle, right? Now, the problem is you got to go find all that. If the guy who's got that on a CSV file hears it on CNN and says, hey, maybe that's my part, starts changing data, right? So one of the makers could simply say, well, you're going to put all your telemetry into my database. Well, they're not going to do that, right? Or they go kicking and screaming because, my uncle doesn't want his feeds and feeds, known by the OEMer or anyone else. And also if, say, a Ford or a GM sets up one of these things, the other guy won't because it's their thing. So that's the cool thing about the blockchain is we can say, hey, we all have control. It's the internet, stupid. We all have control. None of us are in control of the others. And that data, that telemetry can be the start of a really viral business network where you start with provenance and you can go to anything else from there just by writing another chain code or smart contract. And that's, I think, the thing that's quite interesting.
Chain of custody itself becomes less opaque.
That's right, and the regulator can just jack into what looks like a singleton, right? Looks like a centralized system, feels like a centralized system, but it's not. It's a distributed system.
Well, we're going to keep going on the blockchain discussion now. I'm glad you've turned it to that, and I'm going to ask you all one simple question. Please explain to the audience how you're using which blockchain to solve which problem. So I'll go right back to you, John.
Okay. Well, I guess this is a good lead-in for my get ready to tweet. So the reason I'm wearing Vitalik's shirt is that I helped start the Hyperledger Foundation, the Linux Foundation. Who knows what that is? Oh, a lot of people, good. So 1 in 5 projects. Hyperledger is not even done baking, and Hyperledger was the foundation for 1 out of 5 of the hackathon projects, and the winner was a Hyperledger project, which was cool because the code isn't even baked yet. And but there's a lot of misinformation about Hyperledger. So people think it's a competitor to Ethereum or Bitcoin, and that doesn't compute. And I want to make this case. I want to make the point that Hyperledger, what I like to call HLTP, which should sound like HTTP, which should give you a clue what we think about what Hyperledger is a protocol. The idea is that if you were building an Ethereum or something else, or any new blockchain platform or application stack, when we're done with HLTP, you would spend a lot less time doing it. And it's not about any one company's code. We put a lot of code in, Intel's put a lot of code in, Blockstream, DAH, and many others. And we invite everybody, including Ethereum, to become part of an openly governed open source foundation, right? It's not enough to just be open source. You need to be openly governed, and that's not the same thing, right? That's why we gave our code to the Linux Foundation and turned it over, so that we aren't in control. No one else is. It's a blockchain for the blockchain. It's a blockchain of people, and it's not about our code. It's not about your code. It's about all of us, including these guys. And I wanted to make that point.
Linux Foundation's governance model is an example for everyone in this industry on how to manage these types of projects, isn't it?
The structure of the Linux Foundation's governance model looks like a blockchain.
Yeah, it sure does. And IBM has donated 44,000 lines of code.
Oh, it's probably a lot more now.
Probably a lot more than that now? Well, very neat. Lamar, how are you using the blockchain?
So we've taken an approach to actually use a fork of Bitcoin. And a lot of people say, why? Everyone has said it about 100 times here, is that Bitcoin is the only blockchain in production right now that actually is used, correct? And people trust it to hold value. So what we did was take a fork of that, and we started to mess around with some of the opcodes, started to do some things that fit for the problem we're trying to solve. We're talking about solving a very specific problem. So the issue is if we try to use the Bitcoin blockchain, as it is, the current Bitcoin blockchain, we would deal with the politics that are going on right now. And everyone is very aware of the politics. Craig Wright is the latest Satoshi, right? And those kind of things, it makes it very difficult to build solutions on top of, knowing that tomorrow someone could start screwing with the foundation. So what we said was, let's take the foundation as is now and think innovatively of how we can use that technology along with other things that we've built to build a foundation that is far more solid, right? Because we know Bitcoin works. That's the biggest thing. Everyone questions me about why do I use the Bitcoin blockchain? We've changed a lot of the things in it, but for the most part, it works, right? It works on a global scale. We've seen it work. We see that and we don't have to apply all of the rules that are currently there now, because we can change some of those, but the rules that make it solid, we keep those, right? It's like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I always say, the big thing for us is like, there was a caveman that built a wheel, right? And we don't know who that caveman was. His name could have been Satoshi Nakamoto as well, right? But this caveman,
his name was
right? He built this wheel, and no one cared about who built the wheel. They just put a board on top and made a skateboard, or they put a rack on it and made a bike, right? So it's like, why not take the wheel and then innovate on top of the wheel, because you know the wheel works. You know the wheel is going to be used for transportation. You may put treads on it in the future, but right now the wheel as it is, plus a little bit of sauce, shimmy sauce. I don't know why shimmy, but with a little bit of sauce, you can build things on top of it that actually solve real problems. And we are focused so heavily on the financial supply chain. A lot of these guys are talking about the logistical supply chain. We focus completely on the financial supply chain. And we may can work with these guys in the future to handle the other side of that.
But you're also creating a marketplace for invoices.
Yes, yes.
And that's a very interesting approach.
Yeah, so, and that part is some of the shimmy sauce, right?
Yeah.
We create this marketplace for invoices that there are places that do it now, but a lot of times there are a lot of issues with that. When you are trading an asset, you want to make sure that it's the only asset that exists. A lot of times what happens in factoring, you have a guy, he has an invoice and he may have, let's say, what company can I use? Goodyear. He may have Goodyear as a buyer. He'll take that invoice and sell it into a bunch of factoring marketplaces, and all these guys will accept it, right? They'll wind up accepting it, and he'll get more money than the actual asset is worth. What happens when you tokenize that asset and make it to where it's not duplicatable, and then you can also read the actual and say the Goodyear signed this asset and said that it's legitimate. Now you can go out, see the public key, know that it's been signed, and this asset is this asset, right? And that's the part that you can do with blockchains, especially if you share information and get out of silos and start thinking about networks. I mean, networks are everything, and so we still want to keep the whole foundation of Bitcoin, but also build some things on the top that allow us to solve these problems.
Sold me. I'm registering Shimmy Coin.
Shriram and SkuChain make use of all the blockchains out there. It's quite amazing, and I'd like them to share a bit about. I mean, they got to provide a map one day. They're using them and trying to find what's best in each of them. So if you could.
So we focused on the application stack, recognizing that hard cryptography is going to take significant effort, and folks like IBM, Microsoft, and the Linux Foundation and Ethereum are well suited for those kinds of tasks. When we started in September 2014, the only code base available was the Bitcoin and its clones. So we chose BTCD Go as the code base from which we actually did a custom fork. Now, we made some very specific modifications to it. We, in fact, have 6 patent applications in the space because we needed to understand how do you deal with quality, how do you deal with deep tier, how do you deal with issues of provenance, and how do you deal with issues of financing around that. So we focused on building a blockchain agnostic application. So today it works on Bitcoin, it works on our custom fork of Bitcoin, but more interestingly, we also have it work with Ethereum. He got the shirt, we got his money. He's an investor in us. And we are now approximately 2/3 of the way into porting our application onto the Hyperledger stack. We think the Hyperledger stack. So one of the things we understood when we began to work deeply with the Bitcoin clones is that it's a limited P2SH, for those of you, as a smart contract sort of modality that it allows us. But when you get sort of more deeper into provenance codes, we call it POP codes, proof of provenance codes. It's like the replacement for the barcode that allows you to track and trace inventory as it travels through the supply chain. You need something a little more sophisticated. And he was talking about receivables. When you start off with a purchase order and you have that same buyer sign the receivable so that you don't have invoice fraud or duplicate invoices, you start getting into different kinds of structures. And that's when we began to realize we needed a smart contract that was far more, let's call it robust and flexible than, say, just what Bitcoin allowed us. And Ethereum was there and we worked with it. But when Hyperledger came around, it was clearly had taken some of those ideas and seemed to us to be a good platform to build on top of. Now, we fully expect that all the Walmarts, the Targets, the Cargills, the Foxcons, they all have their own potential blockchains. And these are going to interoperate. And then you have the Interledger protocol, which is, I'm sure HLTP is a sort of maybe an evolution of ILP, which essentially is how all of these ledgers are going to talk. And our application wants to be, in that sense, blockchain agnostic. So from the perspective of blockchains, we think that there are 2 or 3 primary ones, which is the Bitcoin inspired, Ethereum, and Hyperledger. And we are on all of those 3.
And both of you are helping people from getting ripped off, so that's good news.
That's right.
Now, Foxconn, please.
Okay. Well, for our group, we haven't decided exactly which blockchain we are using, because I would rather speak from a user point of view. Let's say we would describe ourselves as a technology company. We would say we are kind of managing the 6th floor company. what we call 6 flow in addition to the traditional 3 flow, which is information flow, goods flow, and money flow. We also add like technology flow, people flow, and process flow. Because our belief is that if we can well managing this 6 flow, and then we can do a good successful business for our OEM customer and also for other new business as well.
So an orchestration of flows that,
Yes.
that is coordinated.
Yes, so therefore we think finding a way, for example, like a blockchain, it can record all the record, in a decentralized way. So for example, this is a good way to managing the process, and then managing the process, and then so we can managing the money flow, and can managing the logistics, the goods flow, and also we can efficiently managing the information flow, which is like purchase order, etc.
So big data to useful data.
Yes. So we think using blockchain could be a very efficient way for us to managing the, as I say, the next generation of supply chain.
This is
Our vision. So we work with people like Shriram and other company, and to figure out how to do the kind of proof of concept. Well,
Jump in, John.
Yeah, this is where I think it's quite interesting. And when we talk about this viral growth of blockchain, whether it's Bitcoin, I have to differ a little bit with the Bitcoin notion of build on the wheel with the shimmy sauce. That sometimes it's a horses for courses thing. Like we would really have loved for Bitcoin itself to have been the next Java for us, right? We get behind things that other people do, like we did with Java and Linux and other things. And we really couldn't do that. We thought as we're looking at serious, I won't call it enterprise applications, because I don't want to pigeonhole us into that. Because you could be a 3 or 4 person financial services startup, and you still have a serious job to do that needs serious security, serious implementation. You might have seen we just put out a notice on what we think a production level cloud environment needs to look like, no matter who you get it from, us or someone else. You really need to look at both having the belt and the suspenders, right? Consensus only gets you so far. If you've got a VM administrator on your cloud stack who can be the next Snowden, who can get access, who can put something between the hardware and your stack and get your keys. Not a good day, right? So cloud is a thing. So we really have paid a mind to what serious business is going to be able to do. How can I, if I'm trading cookies and donuts with you, and I'm giving you 4 cookies, but I only give him 3 cookies. I really don't want him to know, ever.
Did you use cookie because I'm a big guy? Kind of rough, man. Like,
You brought up the sauce to start. So
you're right.
You got
I
it
have to
going on
admit,
food,
I had-
Lamar. You got it going on food.
There are vegan sauces.
There are vegan sauces.
Those cookies out there yesterday, I had 3 of those cookies, and my wife is probably going to have at me about it. Anyway, so to the point, you have these are essential things, and we have to have a system that can meet the demands of that, and that's why we're working on Hyperledger, right? To take all the lessons from Bitcoin and Ethereum, all these things, and get it to a state where we can do trillions, quadrillions of dollars. I mean, the DTCC processes $1 quadrillion of value a year. If we're going to do that kind of stuff on blockchains, got to be hardcore. And so we're doing that, and also integration, right? So we have to work on the question of, so for example, lots of companies can come up with good Bitcoin applications, but integration is hard. And we spend a lot of time doing that. So where we can help is come in and say, all right, you've got a great application. We know how to integrate with Kix and MQ and Z-series boxes on enterprise systems, and you have to have them working together. And you have to avoid things like race conditions and acid and all that stuff.
But a lot of times, I just wanted to speak up about that.
You don't want to pick a fight.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times when the old guy comes to the party and tries to bring, no, I mean IBM's an old guy. They try to bring everyone together to work on these standards. actual problems don't always get solved. If you ask them if the Hyperledger has anything going right now, we actually have a pilot working in a bank right now currently that actually is built into the core banking systems, because we're not the old guy coming to the party, right? We actually have something that works with the core with the core banking system as we speak, and that's because we can build software quickly when we need to change those things instead of going to all the other people. It's not picking a fight, it's just the truth of the matter. The thing is that the incumbents, we've been in this blockchain space from the beginning, right? We've been studying it since Satoshi with the white papers, and all the old guys are trying to find us and hire us for $300,000, $400,000 a year. And those people who I know who understand the technology, we are building applications to actually solve problems and not trying to come up with a global standard. Right now, we're trying to solve those problems, and what we'll do is, as we build those, because I really truthfully think Bitcoin already has succeeded, right? The reason why a lot of us are here is on the back of Bitcoin, and all of a sudden we want to throw it out the door, which is funny.
No, we want to learn from it,
which is
take it to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, learn from it, take it to the next level. The question is, learning from it also means applying it, and actually applying the technology to an actual problem and actually using that technology. And I think
in fairness, we kind of do that too.
Yeah.
We have a few clients going on. And
So I think Bitcoin has a lot of value, and I agree with Lamar. We are here largely because Bitcoin has been successful.
Yep.
It's a 4 billion bounty that nobody's been able to crack. That's what sort of shows us every day the power of the technology. But I think enterprises do have slightly different needs. And I think as people get deeper and begin to understand it, there is an opportunity here for sort of thinking through. And I sort of applaud the Hyperledger effort, because I think they've spent some time thinking through best practices. They've taken some of the better understandings that, and I think, Vitalik, I mean, he had his 21st birthday in our office. He's really old at 22 today. But, he figured out something, which I think was a new way of looking at things. So I'm not saying that Bitcoin is not good, but there are other ideas out there too. And I think that what Hyperledger has done is taken some of those ideas and put them together from an enterprise perspective. So I think there's value for both. I don't see.
Yeah, I think that actually, if you ever heard me talk before, I say we are software agnostic and Bitcoin blockchain agnostic as well. I'm just saying that when you choose to build something, you build it with the tools that are necessary at that time. And I think sometimes at the time, if you can build something and still look forward and think forward in the process, we think about all of those things as well. We talk to our customers. They tell us what they really want, and they tell us where the problems are, and we look at that as well. And I think, and the thing is this is nothing. We might be on Hyperledger tomorrow. We were talking in the back, but I just want to make sure that everyone understands that it's not about. If I were up here talking about MySQL, right, we probably wouldn't even be having this conference if this was the MySQL conference, right? Everyone wouldn't become, hey, it's MySQL.
Because it became boring.
Exactly. But that's exactly what I'm saying is that I truthfully think that our technologies right now, Bitcoin is working. Like, anybody in the room who doesn't think Bitcoin is working, nobody raised their hand. Exactly. Bitcoin is actually working. So what I'm saying is
that for courses, though, right? I mean, it works for what it's good for,
but that's what I'm saying is that if you find a specific solution and you create using, I'll just use MySQL. Someone built. They're probably using MySQL with Uber, and the same person is probably, some bank is built on using MySQL, right? So it's like you have this technology that if you understand how to use it, you can solve all types of different problems without having to try to come together in some type of consortium. What I'm saying is those people out there, go ahead and start building something that works, that actually solves a problem and makes money and does those types of things, instead of trying to come up with all of these we all have to agree, we all have to get in the room and have another meeting, and let's have another meeting and another meeting and another meeting, right? Like, let's actually build things, right?
So, Lamar, you got your
I'm sorry,
applause.
my bad.
You got your applause.
I'm sorry.
I do have to say one thing, and then that is, you're exactly right. And so Hyperledger Foundation is a code development organization. There are no meetings. There's meetings, but there's not But we sit down and write code. The code talks. It's not a consortium. It's not a standards body. We write code. Everybody is writing. We had 30 companies in a room for a week writing code together. That was awesome. So I agree with you.
So I want to end this whole session with a bit of a discussion about the future and some blue skies and what it could all look like. And Sriram has some very interesting thoughts. I'm going to go to him quickly, and we're going to pit the answers 1 minute here. And I wanted you to talk a bit about the democratization of supply chains as a result of this technology, and how empowering they are, and how useful they are, and can be in the future.
Sure. So in 1995, there was the internet, and it gave birth to something called e-commerce, and we all know what happened. Today, there is not just the blockchain, there's big data, there's machine learning, there's mobile, and cloud, and all of this is giving birth to what we call collaborative commerce. Xiaomi, which is a Chinese company, produces a phone for $200 that Samsung and Apple charge $800 for, and they're able to do this because they're working collaboratively with many people within their supply chain ecosystem. Tesla just did a $10 billion Kickstarter, and just imagine that whole supply chain. Now they all have that consumer signal that they can start sort of making decisions on. We're entering a new world, and in this world you have the consumer with a smartphone able to make decisions in real time, and this is sort of changing the scope and nature of supply chains. Traditional ERP systems are highly monolithic. They can't sort of adapt, are not so agile. The blockchain provides for the first time the opportunity to sort of think of this differently. So think of Uber. They didn't go around selling taxi software for taxi companies. They said, let's think of taxis differently. The blockchain allows us the opportunity to think of trade differently. And that's what we at SkuChain are attempting to do. So yes, technology is important, structure is important, problems are important, but vision and opportunity and what the new world brings to bear is also important. So thinking of that 3 years from today, just imagine your Kickstarter, you see your Soylent traveling through the supply chain before it hits your door 30 days later. That's the kind of thing that's possible.
And last word to Jack. Apple has been able to create these agile supply chains and has a unique position because of that. Do you see Foxconn being able to deliver that kind of dexterity to many more of your partners?
Yeah, because although I cannot say the name of customer, but we are under the the customer's instruction, and then we definitely should manage it better than customer, right? Also, as I mentioned, we deal with several hundred suppliers, and then yes, we are thinking and also discussing how to use this kind of a new system, this kind of decentralized, this kind of like blockchain, to enable the smart contract, to make it, as I said, more efficient on the purchase order and the logistic and also the payment. I think with all the to streamline all the what we call this three flow of process, then we can make the whole supply chain to be more efficient, and then to saving the cost from supplier and then for us as well. So then totally it will enhance our competitiveness.
I just add one line to that. I was in Shenzhen and talking to various people at Foxconn, and they've got this vision of taking the Chinese shadow banking system out and building a whole S&P rating system around it. Just imagine that, and the blockchain is going to make that possible.
So a nice round of applause for our great audience, a great panel here.
Thank you.